3 issues were. And he said, fentanyl, fentanyl, fentanyl. He gave me his top 3 issues. They were all the same thing. And you can't be farther away from the southern border than Grand Forks. We're 70 miles from the Canadian border. But in every single community across the state of North Dakota, somebody is dying from fentanyl poisoning. 100% of those fentanyl pills are made by the cartels in Mexico. 100%. We oftentimes get into this conversation about whether they're coming in by ports of entry, between ports of entry, U.S. citizens, non-U.S. citizens, all of those different issues. But we lose sight of the fact of the very simple fact that they're all made by the cartels, and they're all in our communities. So I don't particularly care how they're getting here. I want it to stop. You're going to hear from 4 witnesses who have been dealing with these issues from a law enforcement standpoint. And with all due respect to my law enforcement witnesses, I think I'm really excited for Ms. Davis being here. Because what gets lost in this conversation is a community that shares a border with Canada, shares friends and family with Canada, has a tremendous amount of economic activity, whether it's at a retail store in the mall in Grand Forks, or it's trying to get a grain truck across, or maybe just going to your sister's kid's birthday party after 5 p.m. And we've introduced legislation to open revert the hours at our border crossings back to pre-COVID levels. But do you know how frustrated a farmer on the northern border is when they can't cross over after a certain period of time, and then they turn on the news and they see what's happening at Eagle Pass? So I'm really excited that you all have the opportunity to hear not just about the stressors and the pressures that law enforcement is facing, that our communities are facing, but also that our legal commerce is facing because of really bad policy decisions by this administration and a diversion of resources which are necessary to put a Band-Aid essentially on a gunshot wound at the southern border, and really is disallowing North Dakota and Canadian businessmen and women, farmers on both sides of the border, and friends and family from actually engaging in the types of activity that they have been able to do their entire adult lives until this administration, through really terrible and I think in sometimes intentional policy, has taken that away from them. So thank you all for being here. I hope we take this seriously. It's a serious issue. There's a reason that we wanted to do this hearing here, and I'm glad that my North Dakota constituents and law enforcement officers get to tell your story. Thank you.
And I want to thank you, Mr. Armstrong, for your leadership on this issue, for your invitation for us to come here to North Dakota today. I must say, as a Californian, I love to visit states like North Dakota. It gives me a chance to catch up with all of my former California constituents.
We just made sure you didn't come in February.
Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record, and it's now my pleasure to introduce today's witnesses. We have with us today the Honorable Drew Wrigley. Drew Wrigley is the current Attorney General of North Dakota. Mr. Wrigley has served as the state of North Dakota twice as the U.S. Attorney and also as Lieutenant Governor. He graduated from the University of North Dakota with honors in economics and philosophy and holds a Juris Doctor from the American University Washington College of Law. Sheriff Jesse Joner is the Sheriff of Cass County, North Dakota. During his more than 25 years with the Cass County Sheriff's Department, he served in multiple roles, including patrol deputy, detective, and captain. Sheriff Joner has many awards, including 3 Distinguished Service Medals, Meritorious Unit Citation, the Sheriff's Medal, and Combat Action Cross. Sheriff Joner has a Bachelor of Science degree from the North Dakota State University in Humanities and Social Sciences with an emphasis in criminal justice and has attended several leadership courses. Mrs. Rebecca Davis is with us today. She's the Executive Director of the Walhalla Area Chamber of Commerce, a position she's held since September of 2022. Originally from Monroe, North Carolina, Rebecca moved to Walhalla, North Dakota in May of 2021. In addition to her role at the Chamber, she is a dedicated Girl Scout troop leader, a small business owner, and a stepmom of 2. Rebecca also serves on the board for the Gorge Arts and Heritage Council and is a writer for the Borderland Press. Finally, we have with us Sheriff Roger Hutchinson, the Sheriff of Renville County, North Dakota. He's served 35 years in local, state, and federal law enforcement, including time as a patrol officer, a firearms instructor, a counterintelligence special agent on the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force, and on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Sheriff Hutchinson is also deployed in support of the global war on terrorism. He holds a degree from Louisiana State University and is an honor graduate of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and the National Sheriff's Institute at the FBI Academy. I want to welcome all of our witnesses and thank them for appearing today. And I'll begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Good. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered in the record in its entirety, and accordingly we ask that you summarize your testimony. Attorney General Wrigley, we'll begin with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and the members of the committee, to the members of the audience who showed up this morning. I think it's encouraging to see so many people responding to a committee hearing like this, and we appreciate the attention that's being paid to this important issue. I won't go over my bio, but thank you for those introductions. I was elected Attorney General in 2022. Serving as North Dakota's Chief Law Enforcement Officer is a privilege and a solemn responsibility that I welcome each day, but the opportunity to come in here today to talk to you about border insecurity, which is what we have in this country, and the impact that is having on our state is an opportunity that we're glad to have today. As you mentioned, I've twice also served our state and the country as North Dakota's presidentially appointed United States Attorney. Each day I draw in my responsibilities as the Attorney General for North Dakota, I draw on my experience both as a federal and state prosecutor and my time now as the Attorney General. As been noted elsewhere, the catastrophically porous southwest border of the United States has led to the present reality that all America is now very much a border state. And I'm not referring to the northern border impact of that. North Dakota is very much a southwest border state as a result of the policies of the last years. Our sector along the northern border has long required security attention of its own, especially in the aftermath of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks on this nation. However, the situation has deteriorated significantly in recent years, and the current situation is untenable, with millions of illegal aliens streaming across America's southwest border. North Dakota is already experiencing negative law enforcement impacts as a result of the Biden administration's refusal to shut down the border. But my concern is that the worst is very much yet to come, both in the context of street crimes and violence being experienced even as far away here as in North Dakota, but as well as in the arena of America's national security. As the Attorney General of North Dakota, I have the privilege of overseeing the operations of our highly trained and well-equipped North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation. In that capacity, I am routinely briefed on narcotics trafficking investigations, criminal intel gathering, statistical information regarding all crimes and activity. While someone unfamiliar with our state might be forgiven for assuming that narcotics trafficking is something that happens somewhere else, the people of North Dakota are well aware that our state has become a significant target region for narcotics that are produced in Mexico, as Congressman Armstrong was referring to earlier, smuggled across a relatively open international border between Mexico and the United States, then sold at a dramatic profit in a relatively prosperous state where you find yourselves this morning. Methamphetamine, marijuana, synthetic opioids such as fentanyl are the poisons most commonly trafficked to North Dakota from Mexico. A quick view of the basic economics of fentanyl, by way of just one example, illustrates the problem exacerbated by the lax border policies of the Biden administration. The large-scale production of fentanyl that is well documented in Mexico, precursors coming in from China and other nations, produced in Mexico, and then comes across the porous border. Porous is maybe giving it too much credit. Conduits into the United States. Other synthetic opioids are routinely available at the southwest border for 25 cents a pill, 15 cents a pill, 10 cents a pill, depending on the week, depending on the supply at that exact time. The pills are then easily transported to a variety of locations around the United States. But for my concerns this morning, particularly to North Dakota, we've become a significant draw for the traffickers because the premium price that is available to for those pills up in our state can routinely be and is routinely $60, and it's not uncommon to have them be $80 a pill. A 2-day car trip from the southwest border of the United States, I get information from the BCI every single week on seizures taking place across North Dakota of thousands of such pills making their way up from the southwest border. Some are coming here to be used by addicted persons here, be pushed on to those who are not yet addicted, new customers, as they say, or through our area to other areas. But the crime that accompanies this is growing in our state with each passing year. In addition to the worsening narcotics trafficking dangers caused by the Biden administration's refusal to enforce the southwest border, we are all faced with a perilous public safety crisis regarding violent criminals, enemy combatants who pose a clear and present danger to our national security. Relative to the onslaught of illegals entering our country through the southwest border, the federal effort to stop them is abysmal by any fair assessment. At the very same time, it appears as though the Biden administration's permissiveness has signaled weakness at the northern border, resulting in a significant uptick in illegal activity here as well. And the statistics are alarming. I recently requested a briefing from my BCI personnel with relevant information on the topic. I point out to the committee that we have 18 ports of entry along the northern border. We have it's a 310-mile portion of America's northern border. And just 3 of those ports are open 24 hours a day. Travel across that border in our segment is robust due to commerce, due to tourism, due to families on both sides of the line. Troublingly, however, between fiscal year 2021, fiscal year 23 rather, border encounters for the North Dakota sector of the border have escalated in a dramatic rate, calling the integrity of the northern border into serious question. Border encounters include apprehensions of illegals attempting to cross the border, people deemed inadmissible by U.S. border security personnel, and expulsions. There were 548 such entries attempted and refused in fiscal year 2021, then 2,100 in fiscal year 2022, and an explosive 4,444 in fiscal year 2023. Early indications are that for fiscal year 2024, we're going to continue that statistical climb. The fact that these numbers would be troubling enough when viewed even as an affront to our national sovereignty. However, when we consider the fact that it took just 19 terrorists to significantly hobble our nation in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, our respective states are faced with the stunning reality that our communities are in danger and must be alerted to the reality that a significant number of our foreign adversaries have made their way into our midst, and they are undermining public safety and the long-term national security of the United States. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Our next witness is Sheriff Joner. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me a few minutes here. I appreciate Mr. Armstrong inviting us here to testify, and also his cooperation over some of these issues. I've visited with him on different occasions, and he's been very helpful through different obstacles that we've encountered. Before I get started this morning, I want the committee to recognize that Cass County is not a northern border county. We're just down the interstate here from Grand Forks. And I want to make sure that the subcommittee understands that my testimony is not meant to make a political statement. It is not based on assumptions, hypotheticals, or opinions. It is based on facts. In North Dakota, sheriffs don't run on party lines. My intention for this testimony is to bring attention to border issues as they pertain to our ability, my ability, as sheriff to protect human life, our citizens, and provide public safety. My name is Jesse Joner, and I'm the elected sheriff of Cass County, and I'm currently in my second year of my second term as sheriff. I was first elected in 2019, and I have served 26 years as a law enforcement officer. Cass County, North Dakota has a population of approximately 186,000, encompasses 1,768 square miles, and has 27 cities. The Cass County Sheriff's Office has approximately 235 employee positions, and the Cass County Jail houses 348 inmates. We are currently in the process of adding another 192 beds to our jail to bring our capacity to 540 beds because of the overcapacity issues we are currently experiencing. A large number of those housed in our jail and who are most definitely a contributor to our overcrowding issue are incarcerated for charges associated with addiction, mental health, and homelessness. There are two major highways that run through Cass County, Interstate 94 and Interstate 29, which connects Cass County to both the north and south borders of the United States, making narcotics trafficking to our area accessible and enticing. For example, you can purchase M30 pills near the south border for as little as 25 cents a pill and sell that same pill in our area for $60 to $80, drastically increasing profit margins, which is what narcotics traffickers are looking for. In 2023, I served as the president of the Dakota Territory Sheriff's Association. The Dakota Territory Sheriff's Association represents all sheriffs in both North and South Dakota. In that capacity, I wrote a letter that I have submitted as testimony on behalf of the Dakota Territory Sheriff's Association that each of you should have. In that letter, I highlighted our concerns over our country's lack of border security and enforcement of immigration laws on both the north and south borders, as well as the effect that it is having on communities in North and South Dakota. The focus of that letter were our concerns as sheriffs over public safety, human trafficking, narcotics trafficking, and those overdose deaths that are occurring from narcotics trafficked into our communities from the southern border. Those overdose deaths have been rising. In South Dakota in 2022, overdose deaths totaled 35. In North Dakota in that same year, statewide opioid overdose deaths totaled 518, and fentanyl-specific deaths totaled 110. This increase in narcotics trafficking is not only causing loss of life, but also a huge strain on our criminal justice system, driving our crime numbers and placing extreme pressures on jail capacity, addiction services, and mental health services, which in most cases we already lack. In that letter, I also mentioned quantities of narcotics seized, and the numbers I listed in there are specific seizures linked directly to the southern border. We have seized way more than is listed in that letter that we know are coming up from the southern border, but I listed those I can directly from our investigations corroborate. As I have taken part in numerous law enforcement intelligence briefings, we continue to see increased terrorism and potential threats of violence to our communities related to issues involving border security. Without the proper control of the flow or vetting of those entering our country, it is not a matter of if anything is going to happen, it's a matter of when and how many of our citizens are going to be hurt or impacted. So I ask, how did we not learn our lessons from September 11th, 2001? Lastly, assistance from our federal partners when it comes to immigration and immigration enforcement has dwindled from what I was used to in the past. Recently, our office worked through a situation involving a residence in one of our rural communities, Apsaraka, North Dakota, where several individuals who are in the country illegally were and are occupying a residence. As my deputies and I worked through this situation to try and determine citizenship and check criminal histories, we were initially told that they were more likely not going to be able to assist us because of the current political environment. I have to ask, is this really what it has come down to, politics over public safety? As sheriff, I don't get to decide if I want to provide public safety because of politics. As we continue to work through these situations, I was met with what I would term a runaround or lack of importance. This situation occurred on a Wednesday. I began contacting Border Patrol on Thursday, and over the next 5 days, it was hard for me to talk to an agent. I was given the runaround. I was forwarded to different offices. I didn't receive callbacks until finally on that Monday. So from Thursday to Monday, when I finally talked to Border Patrol again, I said, hey, I just need to know if you guys are going to assist us or not, and if you're not going to, why is that? and I was simply given the response that it was because of resources. And I do want to iterate that I do not believe that it's boots on the ground where we're receiving those obstacles. I believe it's coming up somewhere higher. I don't know where that is. But I really believe that the boots on the ground want to help us. They're just being restricted. I was eventually told that they could not assist us because of their lack of resources, and whether this was due to a resource or policy issue or direction is completely unacceptable. As I close, I want to emphasize that this is not a southern border issue. This is a national security issue and a national drug trafficking issue, and an inability to protect our country and our citizens issue. It is time to shut down the borders, or at least come up with a structured policy that sets politics aside and starts putting citizens of our country first. With that, I would answer any questions that the committee has for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Now we're pleased to welcome Ms. Davis to the subcommittee.
Chairperson and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Rebecca Davis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Walhalla Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to represent the cities of Nittany and the rest of the Rendezvous region as well. I'm here to discuss the significant impacts of the current border crossing hours at our local ports of entry and to advocate for the restoration of their former operating hours. The ports of entry in Walhalla and Nittany currently operate on reduced hours. The Walhalla Port of Entry is open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., while the Nittany Port operates from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. In stark contrast, the hours to enter Canada at these same crossings extend until 10 p.m., which causes considerable confusion for travelers and disrupts the daily lives and economic activities of our communities. Prior to COVID-19, both Walhalla and Nittany ports were open until 10 p.m., facilitating smoother cross-border interactions. The closest 24-hour crossing in the region is located in Pembina, which is 39 miles from Walhalla and 19 miles from Nittany. The situation presents a substantial inconvenience, particularly considering the close-knit relationships we share with our Canadian neighbors. Walhalla is a community rich in history and natural beauty. It's home to the Pembina Gorge State Recreation Area, which is becoming North Dakota's 14th state park, and Frost Fire Park. As the second oldest settlement in the Dakotas, Walhalla boasts a wealth of historical significance and a vibrant cultural heritage. These attractions draw numerous visitors from both sides of the border, fostering tourism and economic growth. However, the restricted hours at our local ports of entry hinder the free flow of visitors, negatively impacting local businesses and tourism. For instance, the Riverside Campground located in Walhalla has seen a decline in visitors, particularly Canadians who are unable to come down after work due to the early closure of the ports. If they attempt to come through the Pembina crossing, they face a significant detour, which discourages many from visiting altogether. Walhalla, with a population of approximately 800 residents, has lost our longtime supper restaurant, a favorite among Canadian visitors. Jackson's Bar has seen a decline in business due to people not being able to come and enjoy themselves in the evenings as they once did. Christy Stremick, owner of the Parcel Barn, has had to hold on to packages for extended periods of time because Canadians cannot come to pick them up after work. Additionally, Stremick Farms, a Walhalla potato farmer, has experienced losses in sales and productivity as trucks sit idle due to the reduced hours. Floyd Clark, manager of the Walhalla Co-op, mentioned losing 3 years worth of business. The co-op used to be open until 10 p.m., but now closes at 8 p.m., reducing the availability for cross-border trade and cooperation. Many of our young high school students also worked at the co-op, so the reduction there also affected them. Travelers would fill up with gas on their way back or grab snacks, even if they were traveling to Grand Forks or Fargo. Many residents in our communities have family in Canada, and these restrictions have strained family relationships. Some of those grandparents have never even been able to attend a school concert. Our town survives on Canadian business. City Councilman Leroy Carpenter shared that farm and construction companies have developed relationships with businesses in Winkler, making it easy access to parts rather than having to travel to Grand Forks, which is 2 hours away. Some of the parts aren't available in Grand Forks either, but a 20-minute trip to Winkler used to solve that problem. Nittany, with a population of approximately 300 residents, faces similar challenges. And as a parent of 2 children, I often find myself needing to make last-minute trips for necessities like an outfit for a school concert or supplies or for other school events. The restricted hours make it difficult to quickly access Canadian stores that we have long relied on for such needs, adding stress and inconvenience to our daily lives. Several residents attend church in Canada, which is typically a 10-mile trip. However, due to the restricted hours, they now face an hour-and-a-half journey to return home through the Pembina ports. The Walhalla and Maida ports would be the border crossings for the new state park, making their extended hours crucial for the park's success and accessibility. The Maida port was opened until 5, and had been extended until 7 on a trial basis, but that's a smaller port than the Walhalla port. Mayor Stuart Symington of Nittany has expressed that Nittany and Gretna, both being just a mile from the border, it's like cutting the town in half. The situation also strains our police resources. When our borders are understaffed, it's the residents who often find those crossing illegally and call it into our sheriff's departments, diverting time and resources away from the city needs. The lack of adequate border staff and reduced hours have also had severe humanitarian impacts. Families and individuals crossing illegally have been found in perilous conditions in our fields. Tragically, an Indian family was found deceased, and another family, a mother and 2 children, were found with frostbite. They crossed illegally in our region due to being told it's easier to cross than the southern border, putting their lives at great risk, especially when they don't understand our climate. Our towns rely heavily on legal trade and travel with Canada. Efficient movement of goods and people helps address supply chain issues. It supports agriculture, energy, and tourism. The restricted border hours severely hamper these critical aspects of our local economy. The significance of the new state park cannot be overstated, particularly in light of the recent legislative approval. In 2023, the North Dakota legislature allocated $6 million for the development of new park facilities. Additionally, $2 million for the initial land development has been secured through a matching federal land and water conservation fund grant. This funding underscores the state's commitment to the park's success and highlights the importance for restoring extended hours at the Walhalla and Nittany ports of entry. Ensuring convenient access for visitors from both sides of the border is essential to maximizing the park's potential as a regional and economic attraction. In spring of 2023, the Walhalla Area Chamber of Commerce, along with the cities of Walhalla, Nittany, and Cavalier, circulated a petition to restore the border crossing hours to their previous schedule. The petition garnered over 1,500 signatures, demonstrating the widespread support within our community for this change. Restoring the previous operating hours at the Walhalla, Nittany, and Maida ports of entry is crucial for the well-being of our communities. It'll alleviate confusion, support local businesses, and strengthen our cross-border relationships. We urge the committee to consider the voices of our citizens and to take action to restore these hours, facilitating a return to normalcy and prosperity for the people of North Dakota and our Canadian friends. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Our final witness is Sheriff Hutchinson. Welcome.
I'd like to thank the chairman and the committee for coming to North Dakota. Good morning. My name is Roger Hutchinson. I'm the sheriff of Renville County. I would also like to say that I'm in my second term as sheriff of Renville. I hold board positions with the Fraternal Order of Police, the North Dakota Peace Officer Standardized Training Board, and the Dakota Territory Sheriff's Association. I'm also a member of the National Rifle Association, the Western States Sheriff's Association, and the National Sheriff's Association. On multiple occasions, I've raised my right hand to support both the United States Constitution and my state's Constitution. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Renville County. We're located on the northern border, just north of Minot, North Dakota. We're a rural farming community, and our largest industry is oil production and what supports oil. We're 900 square miles. We have 6 cities, and we have a park as well that supports a lot of Canadian traffic. Located between Renville and Minot is Minot Air Force Base. It's the Air Force's only dual mission base supporting both B-52s and intercontinental ballistic missiles. The population at the Air Force Base is over 5,000 personnel. And within Renville's immediate area, we have 3 missile alert facilities and numerous launch facilities with accompanying troops. Our Sheriff's Department is the only law enforcement entity located within Renville County. We have 7 full-time positions and 3 part-time deputies, and we contract law enforcement services to 3 cities, and we provide support to the border through Operation Stone Garden. All right, a little bit about our northern border. North Dakota, the Canadian border is 310 miles long and connects to the Canadian provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. There are 18 customs and border protection ports of entry. U.S. Border Patrol has 3 stations in North Dakota, Portal, Bottineau, and Pembina, which all fall under Grand Forks sector. They have approximately 200 agents. However, Grand Forks sector covers areas in Montana and Minnesota as well, so those 208 agents are actually covering 861 miles of northern border. North Dakota has 8 counties located on the Canadian border. From west to east, they are Divide, Burke, Renville, Bottineau, Rowlett, Towner, Cavalier, and Pembina. All of our North Dakota border counties participate in Operation Stone Garden, a federally funded program to support Border Patrol operations by providing support to local agencies with grants to pay for personnel to patrol the border area and reimburse operational costs and purchase vital equipment to support the mission. This next section is hard for me to speak to because I know our Border Patrol agents with boots on the ground are not responsible for the policies which take personnel and money away from Grand Forks sector operations. This is not meant to be a negative reflection of our local agents from Portal Station, but when I first became sheriff, I do not recall a day that went by that I did not see a patrol agent patrolling. At one time, we had 4 patrol agents who lived within our county and a resident agent in Mohall, North Dakota. Now we have 1 resident agent in our county who works out of Portal Station. Our deputies rarely see a patrol agent patrolling anywhere in our county. I also cannot remember the last time Portal Station has been fully staffed. Discussions I have had personally in the past iterated patrol agents will be temporarily deployed to the southern border or having to sit in the Portal Station remotely virtually processing undocumented migrants from the southern border. With understaffing issues, TDYs, and virtual processing, who was left to patrol the border? I have been told the TDY rate has slowed and the number of PAs in Portal has increased, but we have failed to see any increased patrols in our area. Our Sheriff's Office typically has 1 deputy patrolling per shift, and we came to rely upon patrol agents to be in our area to assist if needed. Sadly, those days have long passed. As I prepared my testimony, I reached out to North Dakota sheriffs on the southern border. For those who chose to respond, the stories were familiar. We all have good working relationships with our local station and patrol agents, but I've noticed a decline in their presence and or services. Recently, a North Dakota Patrol Station Chief provided a presentation at our North Dakota Sheriff's Conference where he outlined the current policy being followed. The current policy was not to respond to any incidents in which undocumented migrants were detained by local law enforcement unless other mitigating circumstances arose, such as criminal charges. Even with some criminal charges, such as property damage to a farmer's field, the individuals were still released. Our North Dakota sheriffs have had to deal with border-related dead bodies, high-speed pursuits, responding to numerous border incursions, property damage to croplands and fence cutting, humanitarian rescues in extreme conditions, illegal substances, counterfeit goods, and subjects with warrants. Grand Forks sector acknowledged Pembina Station is their busiest station for cross-border activity and recently seized 65 firearms attempting to be smuggled into Canada. The majority of the nationalities we have come across are Nigerians, Romanians, and Indians. However, our biggest concern is who we did not catch. We have a wide open, vast border with no natural physical barriers and very few man-made ones. I've traveled to the southern border and seen firsthand the chaos our law enforcement deals with on a daily basis, and also the unintended consequences of our current immigration policy. I'm in no way comparing our northern border to the southern border, but what I am saying is that our northern border is open and not secure. Canada's entry requirements into the country different from the U.S., which provides opportunity for would-be bad actors to easily gain entry into the U.S. One last concern would be the operating times of certain points of entry, which are not open 24 hours. Our North Dakota POEs close at 7 p.m., but Canadian POEs are open till 10, thereby allowing traffic to pass through our POE with the gates left open. There's nothing to stop the southbound traffic into the U.S. Again, I'd like to thank the committee for making a trip to North Dakota and listening to the issues that affect North Dakotans. I hope we can continue to move forward in reducing the number of undocumented migrants across our borders and the crimes they're associated with. I believe hearing such of these help bring light to the issues. Please leave here knowing that North Dakota sheriffs will keep doing their part to keep our citizens safe. Thank you for allowing my testimony. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I also, as part of my written testimony, have submitted some photographs, so if you have questions on those, I'll be glad to answer as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We'll now proceed under the 5-minute rule of questions, and the chair recognizes Mr. Tiffany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for another hearing in regards to every state being a border state. Sheriff Hutchinson, FBI Director Ray, when he appeared before this committee in the last year, he said the terror threat and the danger as a result of what's happening at the border has never been higher, and he's very concerned. Do you agree with his assessment?
I absolutely agree.
So Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security has downplayed that. He has said that, no, the southern border is not really any worse than it's been previously, and does not agree with Director Ray. Which one do you agree with?
I agree with Director Ray.
Also, I don't know if you've ever met a man named Sheriff Mark Daniels from Cochise County in Arizona. He told us in Washington, D.C., under questioning, under oath, that fentanyl, the amount of fentanyl coming into this country was severely exacerbated as a result of the border being opened on January 20th of 2021, as the chairman alluded to. Do you agree with Sheriff Daniels?
I do agree, yes.
Secretary Mayorkas was there that same day when Sheriff Daniels made his statement, or Secretary Mayorkas at least heard it, and he downplayed it and said that Sheriff Daniels was incorrect. Who do you believe is correct, Secretary Mayorkas or Sheriff Daniels?
I believe that Sheriff Daniels is correct.
Sheriff Joner, tell us a little bit about the scourge of fentanyl, and have you seen a rapid uptick here in North Dakota over the last few years of fentanyl-related deaths?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Tiffany, most definitely that we have. As I mentioned in my testimony, North Dakota is a ripe area for narcotics trafficking because of the increase in profits that narcotics traffickers can make from selling their product in North Dakota or South Dakota. And typically what we see is narcotics being trafficked up to the southern border to what we would consider hub cities. Those hub cities for North Dakota typically are Chicago, Minneapolis. For South Dakota, it's typically up through Denver, and we see some stuff directly coming in from the borders, just directly in without going through those hub cities. We've most definitely seen an increase in the amount of fentanyl that we've been seizing. My testimony is very specific in the quantities that I put in the Dakota Sheriff's Association letter that I presented. Those are based on me visiting with our narcotics investigators, who through their investigations visit with, of course, suspects, victims, witnesses who have directly linked fentanyl trafficking back to the southern border through those interviews.
So you've seen a serious uptick, is that correct, in
Yes.
the use of fentanyl and the number of deaths?
Yes, that is correct.
Attorney General, we've heard about presence of gangs in Montana. At least I've seen news stories, especially infiltrating some of the tribes out there. Are you seeing anything like that in North Dakota? And when I say the gang-related stuff that's coming up from Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Tiffany, the answer is yes. And people, I think, if they attribute gangs to just something that they see on television and then they're organized and they have a headquarters, that sort of thing, it's much more dispersed than that, and it's absolutely impacting us here because the profit margins are drawing the attention of any gang member anywhere. We've got huge gangs, large gang presence in Detroit, for instance, who have found avenues out to North Dakota, predominantly. Not only, but they're targeting our Native American reservations, in large part also because the BIA typically staffs law enforcement in this part of the world at about 25%. I can speak across 10 years as United States Attorney. So they're under-patrolled, underserved. We had to go to the state legislature in the last session and ask for additional resources so that we could start task forces around the reservation and address those openings in enforcement, and the legislature responded, and we're attempting to make grounds there. But the answer is yes. The gangs have identified an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, a 2-day drive to North Dakota with pills that cost you a dime, 15 cents, or a quarter on a bad day, and you're fetching $60 a pill on average up here. The profits are astronomical, and they're drawing people in, and if they get arrested and they get incarcerated, it's too often it's not for long enough. In North Dakota, that's a different speech. But on the federal side, they just find someone else to step into that role. So the pipeline's there. It's doing grievous harm out here in North Dakota on the plains, but everywhere in between.
Mr. Chairman, may I take the liberty of asking one quick final question of the two sheriffs? Would you be willing to help a future administration if they wanted to get control of illegal immigration to help return those who are illegally in our country? Would you be willing to help a federal effort in regards to this?
I would absolutely be willing to help.
Sheriff Joner?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
I yield back.
Great. Thank you. I'm next pleased to recognize Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. I was fortunate enough to arrive early yesterday, and Sheriff Terry Mettinger, who's here with us, Sheriff, was very generous with his time and was able to take myself and a couple of staff people on a tour of the area all the way up to the border, and I certainly appreciate that. We had a great discussion on kind of what's going on logistically and kind of the inner workings, I guess, of all the different levels of law enforcement and how they deal with not only enforcement, but I think kind of cooperative efforts when it comes to the border. Patrol Agent Andrew Mazzaro, I don't know that Andrew made it today, with the U.S. Border Patrol. Fabulous briefing, gave us a lot of information, and certainly kind of an overview of all the ports of entry. So I thought it was very valuable, and I wanted to thank him as well. And Ms. Davis, I wish you were with us yesterday, because when we went up to the port of entry, I could have put those Homeland Security guys kind of on their heels with those questions that you asked earlier. So we'll see if we can't help follow up on some of that stuff. I think it would be valuable. I guess where I wanted to start was with the Attorney General. You kind of touched on a little bit, but there are many levels, obviously, of law enforcement, and it's kind of it's a puzzle. But at the end of the day, you still have to be able to come up with the resources to fund all these different levels of law enforcement. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your view, kind of from the AG's level, on and how that filters down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fitzgerald, well, in North Dakota, federal law enforcement is under-personed, I'll say. We got great agents, but there aren't enough of them. And without dovetailing together federal, state, local, tribal law enforcement, you wouldn't have meaningful, impactful enforcement in North Dakota. So thankfully, people work together well here. The sheriffs work well together. Our BCI has statewide reach and works well with the police departments, the sheriff's departments, and then the federal entities that are here. But the one that sticks out to me glaringly all the time is that the BIA is so grotesquely understaffed and underfunded. And I think part of that is historically because they're through the Interior Department as opposed to through the Department of Justice, where there can be some coordination, understanding, and deploying of the resources. The agents that are here, the BIA agents that are here are very good. They rotate through. Well, that's a different question, but it creates a real lapse that has to be filled and is filled by our sheriff's departments do a tremendous job around the state working well together in their own counties and with each other, and same with the police departments. And we try to be part of that glue that makes it stick together too. But you know, there are real glitches, I think, in the funding mechanisms for federal enforcement. And I won't speak on behalf of the Department of Justice in this instance, but I know that they could use more resources, and we could use them as well.
Thank you. Very good. Ms. Davis, I want to kind of go back to your topic again. Because in Wisconsin, I represent the 5th District, is the west suburbs of Milwaukee, and a couple of counties, Dodge and Jefferson County, very rural. But our state itself had $8.5 billion in goods that were moved through the export market. So I know it's a huge issue, really for everybody. And I'm sure some states don't even realize that. But this inadequate staffing, I think, is not something I've just heard here, but also when you're at the southern border for some of those ports of entry as well. So can you just tell us, kind of with the reduced hours that you were talking about earlier, kind of, have you seen this happen gradually, or was it just something that happened all of a sudden and then you had to deal with the impact of that as the Chamber of Commerce?
Mr. Fitzgerald and Chairman, I believe what happened was everything shut down for COVID, and then when the rest of the world essentially, or at least the rest of the U.S., went back to normal, the northern border was essentially forgotten about. The border was opened back up to reduced hours, being 5 in Maida, 4 in Nichey, and 6 in Walhalla, and then they just were like, oh, you're good. You don't need any additional people. Right. When we do have the traffic, and we are losing out on that. So I think it was just a sudden thing that once COVID happened, they shut the border down, and then they brought it back, but the rest of the world went back to normal, and we were just forgotten.
Yeah, and that's kind of similar to what I think we heard yesterday in the discussions we had. To the two sheriffs. When Border Patrol agents from North Dakota are detailed to process illegal aliens who enter through the southwest border, those agents are obviously not performing kind of daily functions. Do you feel like in your integration to kind of those different levels of law enforcement, do you guys feel like there are adequate resources there, or are you watching, Border Patrol kind of have to, not complete all those tasks, so that falls on you guys? I was wondering if you could just comment on that.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Fitzgerald. Whenever the Border Patrol agent has to sit in his office and virtually process someone on the southern border, I appreciate the fact that it's saving the federal government some money by not having to TDY him down to the southern border.
Right.
But he is not out on patrol. He sits there for his whole shift processing migrants that are coming across the southern border, and he's not out on patrol. So if they still have people that are TDY down there, or they're sitting in the office and not able to leave, they're not out there patrolling.
Very good. Sheriff, do you have a comment on that one?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Fitzgerald, yes, thanks for the question. For us, not being a border county, we're a little bit different because we're a little bit farther away from the border, so it takes those resources a little bit of time to get to us. When we come into contact with people that are in the country illegally, literally what we're looking for and assistance from those agencies is to be able to maybe conduct a translation for us if we don't have resources to do that, but then also to help us verify criminal histories, because I think everyone here on the subcommittee understands that when we run a criminal history check on someone, we're checking them through our resources that are United States wide, NCIC, quiz. We don't have access to checking criminal histories like our federal partners do. And so for us as sheriffs, like I mentioned earlier in my testimony, it's important to us that we can protect our citizens in the counties that we serve. And without understanding what people's criminal histories are and being given the direction to, that they can't do anything, that we should just let them go, that doesn't give us a good feeling, because now we're letting someone go and we don't have any idea who they are. So that's become a problem. I think it's a resource issue, like I mentioned before. Again, when we talk to our Border Patrol partners, the boots on the ground, they're not telling us simply, hey, we don't want to help you. They're simply saying that they can't, or they don't have the resources, they don't have the time to come and do that. And so that's where we run into these issues. And in my particular situation where I was referring to Absaraka, I was able to get a hold of ERO through that process, which is, as you guys know, the enforcement branch of deportation of ICE and Border Patrol. The ICE agent that I spoke with was very helpful. They did eventually come out to assist me at the residence. The same with our U.S. attorney was very helpful. It was just a lack of resources on Border Patrol's end of things.
Very good. Thank you all for being here. I yield back.
Great, thank you. Ms. Fishbach.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to participate today. So many of you know I am right across the state border, and so I represent about half of Minnesota's border with Canada. And so a lot of the issues that I'm hearing today, we're facing too, and so love to be partners on that. And I'm glad that I am have the opportunity to speak right after Mr. Fitzgerald, because I had a couple of follow-up questions, and I was going to ask you, Ms. Davis, about about when the change was made, and you mentioned COVID, and we've got some of the same issues at our border crossings in Minnesota, but maybe a little follow-up for the sheriffs. Sheriff Joner, you mentioned one very specific incident with the illegals occupying a house where you couldn't get the help you needed. And I was just kind of curious, when did that become more of an issue? When did you, in the past, have the patrol agents been very helpful? And I'm just wondering if it's more of a trend, because you did mention it was politics over policy in your opening statement. And so I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Fishbach, thanks again for the question. More probably over maybe the last year and a half. The situation that I spoke to in Absaraka is just one that I brought to light. We've had other instances where our deputies have made traffic stops with people who are in the country illegally, and typically through those interactions we'll contact Border Patrol as well to look for guidance, maybe based on what the information that person is giving us. And we're even on our traffic stops, we're not getting the help that we used to. So typically when we would contact them, if we had concerns or issues with someone, and maybe stories not making sense in our interactions with these individuals, they would come out and assist us through those investigations. Most certainly operating the jail as a sheriff, when we are able to detain people for illegal activity, we've seen a little bit of maybe decrease in that as well, where Border Patrol agents would typically come down to our jail and help further those interviews, those investigations. Typically now it's more over the phone that those type of interactions happen. And again, much like Sheriff Hutchinson said, this is not meant to provide any negative commentary for boots on the ground, because we've worked with those individuals for a long time, and they're good partners. I think they're being restricted, and they don't have the resources to accommodate our requests.
No, and I appreciate that, because I think that's happening a lot. Actually, I believe it was Mr. Tiffany who mentioned the sheriff down in Cochise County, and I was down there visiting the border too, and it was, I can't remember, was it Ways and Means or what committee we were there for, but we were visiting the border, and it was funny because that sheriff actually mentioned the northern border, that he saw that it was an issue there, So he's sitting there on the southern border with what's all happening there, but he recognizes that it's a huge issue too, and so we need to deal with the border, period. We should not, talk about southern or northern, but we need to deal with the border, because it's a little like a balloon. When you push on one side, then they're going to find another way in, and so we need to recognize that. And Sheriff Hutchinson, what is your experience, as we're taking a look at, is there assistance? And I agree that we shouldn't blame the actual agents, because I think it is coming from the top down, and they're being pushed in different directions. But has your experience with assistance been similar?
Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Fishback, yes, ma'am. It is definitely a change in how they operate that I'm assuming is policy related. So whenever a chief of Portal Station comes to a sheriff's association and literally says that their policy is not to respond if it's just a undocumented migrant, which that before they would definitely send a patrol agent out to interview and process the person, and even if they didn't start deportation procedures, at least that person was in the system, and now that is not happening.
Well, and again, I'm almost out of time, but I appreciate you all being here and sharing the information you have and sharing the stories, but I appreciate the public being here too, and the members, because, you know, it is important that we get out here and we hear about what's going on. And so I appreciate them coming, you know, way up to North Dakota. We could have gone to Minnesota, but hey, you know. But no, I appreciate it, because it really is, it's a huge issue. And I think that with the southern border getting all of the attention, we are not talking, we have to continue, and they're not paying attention to the northern border. Like you said, everybody went back to normal and they forgot about the northern border. And so we need to make sure that we are addressing that. And so I appreciate you all sharing your stories. And I will say they're similar to what we are experiencing in Minnesota. So thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Next is the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here. You know, this is difficult to sit and listen to, because we keep asking, when's something going to take place? When are we going to do something about this? And I don't know, looking out at your faces, if any of you have lost a child to these overdoses. Part of my life has been spent coaching little kids in baseball and football. I can tell you, as a person, there's nothing more uplifting than to see the birth of a child. There's nothing more heartbreaking than to bury a child. When I see what's happening in our country today, and we come here to talk to you because we brought the Congress to the country to hear what you're going through. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to submit this letter. This is to Secretary Mayorkas. We asked him back on, I believe it was in March, to please respond to us no later than April 25th. I don't know. He must have misplaced his calendar. You never get an answer from any of these people. And now, Chairman, when you started off, we talked about, is it a red issue? Is it a blue issue? What issue is it? Is it the Republicans? Is it the Democrats? And the answer is yes. It is all of us. My question is, where is the outrage from the American people? How can we sit back and watch this dereliction of duty? Chief, you said it. You raise your hand and you take an oath of office. If you don't want to do the job, don't take the oath. If you're not going to enforce the laws, drop out of that part of society. If you're going to sit back and watch an entire nation crumble and lose the most important part of our future, because children represent about 25% of our population, they are 100% of our future. How long can we sit and wait? How long can we be told, you're fools, there's no problem there? And you know what? They're right. The problem is everywhere, not just there. Now, when I read your testimony, and I got to tell you, this stuff is the kind of stuff that makes you want to stand up and say, I am not going to put up with this. I am not going to stand for this. I am not going to allow this to go on and on and on. I'm tired of burying little kids that I coached. I'm tired of watching my own son sit in a prison, not because he committed a crime, but because he's an addict. All of us should be just outraged at what's happening in this country. The fact that we're so calm and so under control is what this administration wants you to believe. There's no problem here. Move on, folks. You're imagining it. It doesn't exist. Sheriffs, when I read your testimony, Ms. Davis, when I read your testimony, It is something else. It's not heartbreaking. I'm tired of people telling me they're heartbroken. I said, well, then get off your rear end and do something about it. Don't let your heart break. Put it back together and go and fight for the future. Well, General, you and I talked a little bit outside, and I want to get down to this because you can't fix something with nothing. We have laws on the books. Like people keep telling me, you guys in Congress better pass something. I said, we have. We're the legislative body. It then goes to the executive branch to enforce. There is no enforcement. People have to be held accountable for their breaking their oath of office. General, you had some ideas, though, because as I said, you can't fix something with nothing. So we know we have all these folks here. There's no airplane, there's no bus, there's no ship that you can put them all on and take them back to wherever it is that they came from. What is it that we have to do?
I have to answer that? Like everything we're going to do? Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kelly, I appreciate. Now, you made a mistake. You gave me your cell phone because you and I are going to be friends. I can tell. And I wish that my colleagues in the Attorney General's office were watching right now, because this is the way most of our days start as we discuss the news of the day and what's going on with this level of passion that you're describing. One of the discussions we had, if you're referencing in the hallway, is the idea that it's a very real problem to have millions of people who have come into this country illegally, at least hundreds of thousands of them who are themselves criminals, even before they make the criminal act of coming across the border. And the federal government's not doing a good job of keeping statistics of crimes that are being committed in the United States by people who have recently come across that border. And I don't blame them when you consider that it's their policy that's allowing that. The chairman pointed out that this wasn't a problem just prior to the administration taking hold and changing the policies and opening the doors. One of the things that we mentioned in the hallway was the idea, and I pledge myself to it, I can pledge this effort in North Dakota. If there's going to be an effort, and there needs to be, let's say there's a change of administrations, and there needs to be an effort to deport people who have come here illegally. In way too many instances, it's not just anecdotal. They mean us grievous harm. They don't love this country. They didn't come here because they love the American way. I'm sure they can find those anecdotes too, but we understand this. And they're coming over from all sorts of countries, by the way, even through the northern border. Representative Fischbach mentioned when you push the balloon, it expands elsewhere. Let me go through the list. I mentioned the border encounters. Here are the countries that are represented coming across the northern border. Canada, 261. This is just for fiscal year, recent fiscal year. India, Mexico, China, Romania, Ukraine, Philippines, Brazil, Ecuador, Honduras, Guatemala, Colombia, El Salvador. In a more recent year, the most recent year for which we have statistics, those countries add Cuba, El Salvador, China, Turkey. The list goes on and on and on. They're just finding a way into the country. So I will pledge the office of Attorney General in North Dakota to this effort, and I've already started reaching out to colleagues of mine around the country. It will take a concerted effort of attorneys general, large city DAs, people in law enforcement, sheriffs, chiefs of police, and other organizations to band together, pursue federal policy of rounding up. It's a foul-sounding word, but it's necessary. They are releasing people with a slip of paper saying, you've come to this country illegally. We'll see you at your hearing in 2029 or 2030. It's laughable. I cite to the 19 hijackers just as a historical footnote to remind us when millions are coming across illegally, hundreds of thousands who mean us grievous harm, untold thousands who are committing crimes, heinous violent crimes in this country as we speak. 19. Changed the world. And now we have a policy. I'll end there, except to say this. Every one of us, our first act of security in our homes for the next day is to lock the doors. That's our first act of security for tomorrow, is to lock the doors. America's next act of security needs to be lock the doors. We need to stop what's happening every day. I know you all know this. You started the passion part of this. So I pledge myself to that publicly, if we can get a change of policy, to be one of the attorneys general, and there will be others across the country. who will join in coordinating law enforcement efforts to do this in an orderly fashion that protects the American people.
Well, I want to thank you, but in all of you, when I read your testimony, I watched your testimony here. These are things that just don't bother you because of your office. This is what bothers you as an American citizen of what is happening to this country. And it's happening on our watch, and it's in full view. And as we watch it happen, we're told there's nothing wrong. Please quit making an issue out of something that's not an issue. This is an issue. This has to be addressed. And for all of us, this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is an American issue. Please forget the politics and take a look at the policy. Because until we stand up and say, stop, they are going to continue on this path. There is no way future generations would have done what they've done, 1.5 million in uniform, and we just memorialized them on Monday, thanking them for their sacrifice, their life, to give us this opportunity. And for us to sit here and watch this coming apart at the seams, and people telling us, you guys are just making a big deal about something that doesn't exist, that is absolutely false. It's a false lie. And it's one thing I think as a people, not as the Republican Party, but as a people, the American people need to understand that they are losing the greatest nation the world has ever known. It's happening on our watch, and it's almost going on with our permission, because we sit back, we rub our hands and say, I wish I could do something about it. And I said, you can't. Get registered and get out and vote and take as many friends as you can. Get them educated. I am not going to lose another son. I'm not going to lose another little kid that I hope to coach. I am not going to lose anybody that could be a big part of this nation coming into the future. I'm sorry for going on, but I'll tell you what. We have been dormant too long watching this happen. It is up to us. If it's going to change, it is up to us. We cannot expect somebody in the White House to do it. They're not capable, and they're not going to. So with that, thank you all. Sheriffs, I can't imagine what you go through every day. Ms. Davis, thank you so much. General, we are going to stay in touch, and we've got to find something to do about this. I'm tired of sending letters and getting no response. I'm tired of people standing up and saying that there's no problem right here when we bury them every single day and we have a blind eye and a deaf ear to those cries. I'm sorry for getting impassioned about this, but if we're not passionate about our future, then we shouldn't be here. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. I think I'll try to pick up there and remind us that Abraham Lincoln told his generation that they were destined to be remembered because they were destined to either nobly save or meanly lose. This, the last best hope of mankind on this earth. Attorney General Wrigley, you reminded us of the 19 terrorists of 9/11. We released 5,000 of the most dangerous terrorists on the planet when we abandoned Bagram during this administration. We know where one of them went. 10 days later, they detonated the bomb that killed 13 U.S. service members at Kabul airport. We don't know where the other 5,000 are. Is it conceivable that among the 2 million known gotaways, the people that we actually watched cross the border but couldn't intercept, are some of those terrorists, and how long do you think we've got?
Mr. Chairman, I wish I had an answer for what the timeline looked like that. I will say that Chris Wray and I have been friends for a lot of years since he was the head of the criminal division. I was U.S. Attorney under President Bush at the time. I've known him a long time. He's a pretty sober guy. He wouldn't be saying publicly what he's saying if he didn't have a sense that the threat is imminent. It's very real. You all get the briefings that the rest of us don't get, but when Chris Wray, who I know, as I said, I know him personally, to not be a person who would be saying that to be, trying to be interesting in public comment. In fact, he always tries to be uninteresting in public comment. But that should chill us, and to realize the vastness of the numbers is part of the problem. But the fact that they were allowed in here, they're here, and we don't talk about sleeper cells anymore. Well, they're asleep at the moment, but they can be awakened in an instant, and I think that we're getting that direction from the FBI.
I fear a coordinated attack at multiple targets at the same hour, the same day, leaving thousands of dead Americans all across the country, and I'm afraid that day is coming. The sheriffs described vast miles of the northern border that are completely now unpatrolled, so we can't even watch people crossing the border. Is that correct? Because we don't have any eyes there?
Not human eyes. Of course, there are cameras that are out there, but
But if we
The
can't
northern
intercept
border's
them,
open, sir.
we know nothing about them. Sheriff Joner, in response to Mr. Fitzgerald, you mentioned that you run a background check on the illegal migrants that you encounter. But if they're illegally crossing for the first time, they have no record in the United States. So do you know anything about them?
Mr. Chairman, that would be correct. I mean, and at that point, we don't.
So that if this is a convicted murderer who's escaped Venezuela, you don't have that information available to you.
Do not have that
I assume you
information.
turn them over to the Border Patrol. What does the Border Patrol do with them?
And that's what we would try to do, would be to contact them to help us. And if it's a cooperating country, as you guys know, they would have access to gain that
So-
information, but we don't.
How well vetted would you say these illegal migrants are?
Not at all.
Have you encountered any that you would deem a threat to your community?
Well, I don't know that because we're not able to always get cooperation and run those background checks on everyone.
Sheriff Hutchinson?
I wouldn't know that information either. I can just tell you that we do have people coming across the border. Some of them we catch, some of them we don't.
How would you describe the difference between your department's experience with the Border Patrol during the Trump administration compared to today?
They were staffed better. And like I said, we typically only have one deputy on patrol at a time. And Border Patrol was our biggest agency that would back up our deputies. And now that doesn't exist because they're just not out there.
Sheriff Joner?
Mr. Chairman, I would say that over the last year and a half to 2 years is where we've noticed the change.
I'm sorry, say again?
Over the last year and a half to 2 years is where we've noticed the change.
And what's the change?
With the cooperation, just less cooperation.
What do the Border Patrol officers tell you privately?
Well, no, in the one situation that I mentioned to you, there was one of the agents had mentioned to us with the current political environment, they didn't believe that they'd be able to assist us. I don't know what that means.
Sheriff Hutchinson, what do they tell you?
Mr. Chairman, I think they are as frustrated as we are.
Ms. Davis, could you describe the local economy pre-lockdown compared to today?
Mr. Chairperson, Chairman, the economy, as I know it, seemed to be a lot better prior to the restricted hours. People were able to come across more freely. Frost Fire Park was booming. Hotel stays were up. The campground was full every weekend, typically with Canadian visitors. And we had more restaurants that we could eat at.
And you attribute that directly to the immigration policies in effect now, as compared to during pre-lockdown?
I would definitely attribute it to the lack of staffing for the border hours.
Would you call that more significant or less significant than, say, the impact of inflation on the economy in those years?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Would you say that the immigration hours, the restrictions, are more significant or less significant to the local economy than the inflation of the last 3 years?
I think it's more significant.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. We'll now close the hearing with questions from our host, Congressman Armstrong.
I told the chairman that you all can get a hold of me at any time, so I feel like it is really important that you get to tell your story to other members of Congress. But I want to start with, the reason I don't write questions is because and the reason I like going last is because things come up that are, I think, really important. And I think the easiest way to start this is with the Attorney General and the Cass County Sheriff and talking about the issue that happened in Western Cass County. How would that have been handled when you were the U.S. Attorney? If local law enforcement has illegal immigrants in a house in Western Cass County. And by the way, just before this, I want to preface this because I agree with you all very much so that the boots on the ground are as frustrated as anybody else. The policy is not being written in the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Dakota, and we'll get back to BIA here in a second because I think that's important. These are leadership decisions that are causing as many frustrations with federal law enforcement as they are with state law enforcement. So to anybody watching this or understanding this is, we need to give them the tools they have to do their job, and they know how to do it because they've done it before. But you and I both practiced in federal court at a different time and under different policies and administration. And how would that have been handled? Do you think it would have waited 5 days to get a phone call back?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Armstrong, I mean, of course not. They would have been detained immediately. And the day that this happened, Sheriff Joner and I were on the phone discussing the matter, and to leave people with their hands up, not knowing what's to take place next, and to understand that the vulnerability is there. To the other question, you don't know you know that they're there illegally, or you suspect that. You know that you don't know what their records are. You don't know what brought them here, what their intentions are, what they're up to. And there's not anything that you can do. Our BCI agents don't have the ability to swoop in and make that arrest. They're not able to do that lawfully in that instance. And so you're left, and yet it shouldn't surprise us. An administration that has opened the border has opened the interior. And so, no, we would have done. There would have been federal involvement immediately. Persons would have been an on-the-ground investigation at that point, assisting, working with local law enforcement. And if there were, they would have slapped detainers on them and moved forward with it. They would have been detained, and it would have been determined before they were ever released.
And that's my second question, because I think this is really important, because this shows you where the policy is the problem. When you were practicing U.S. Attorney either in your first time or your second time, if an illegal reentry of a previously deported alien has a detention hearing within 48 hours, what percentage of those people were being released prior to either deportation or criminal trial when you were the U.S. Attorney?
Being released?
Being released after they were pretrial detention for it being illegal reentry.
Well, I wouldn't be able to give you a percentage. It just wasn't the
I can
policy.
tell you 100% of my clients were detained prior till trial. And that is just simply not as what is happening now.
We weren't targeting you.
No, I think it was it was a standard policy, and that is a very different thing. Sheriff Hutchinson, I think one of the things I learned when I went to Eagle Pass, and I don't understand this, and I want to go to the 4 agents on patrol, is people forget the border's not linear. The border extends all the way down into Cass County, all the way into everywhere. But when you don't have 4 patrol agents, federal patrol agents, they're not just patrolling the border. They're patrolling a large rural area of North Dakota looking for things that may have gotten across the border. So when you don't have 4 patrol agents at the federal level, who takes up that slack in your county?
Oh, well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Armstrong, we try.
Yeah.
One person on duty, like I repeated for the 3rd time now. It's difficult because, like I said, we don't know who's coming across.
Criminals are like water. They will follow the path of least resistance. Do you think that people, particularly more sophisticated criminal elements, are aware of the fact that there are no longer Border Patrol agents patrolling the northern border?
From my previous life, absolutely.
And I do, and I want to go to Ms. Davis, because I think it's not like we're asking for something new. They took away something that was essential to these communities. And I think for a lot of people who represent different areas of Congress, or different areas of the country, they don't understand what it means when you lose one restaurant in Walhalla, or when you lose 2 hours of business at a co-op, or what that does to the fabric of the community. And you're on the front line, of this. People are angry. People are really, really frustrated, and not just in the illegal activity, but in the lack of any kind of care at all for what our communities need to survive, and what has been taken away from us in economic activity because of bad policies. So, this is more than like a one business closing. This is something that affects the entire community, the entire economy, and in the entire chain of commerce. And just what is the frustration level of your communities going through all of this at the same time where they can watch what's happening at our southern border and just look at this and say, I might lose my business because we can't have the normal chain of commerce that we used to have?
I would say, Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Chairman, the level of frustration in our community is pretty high. aren't able to go see family members. What should be a quick trip then takes hours. It's 2 hours from Walhalla to Grand Forks. So say if I was to come grocery shop in Grand Forks, that's 2 hours down here and then 2 hours back. Our grocery store is super small. It's limited. I love the resource it provides, but it's not always the one-stop shop. And then that trickles down because our community then has the leakage. So we rely on the Canadians to fill in for the leakage of funds from the community. The prom committee, they were shuffling around trying to find where to host the dance or the meal prior to the dance. Like kids were having to go to other communities further away to have their dinner for prom, to take their date or what have you. And it shouldn't be that way. It wasn't that way to start with, and it shouldn't be that way now.
I think that's, like, the entire fabric of the community changes. And these are some of the greatest small towns, and when I mean small towns, I mean small towns in the whole country. And by real policy decisions that have affected how we conduct legal commerce on the border at the same time where we just allow the open flow of illegal commerce on the border is really, really, truly affecting everybody in the ag community, everybody in the small community, every small sheriff's department on the northern border who is diverting resources to do a job the federal government is supposed to do. And I think I can't leave this without one thing, because we talk about this a lot in DC, and I think the biggest mistake that the DOJ ever made was when it started galvanizing all the leadership in Washington. And this goes to the BIA conversation and all of that. And from somebody who is on the ground and who's done this job at a law enforcement level, we have to get back to letting our district offices and our law enforcement members, whether it's Border Patrol, whether it's FBI, whether it's BIA, to actually have the tools and resources they need to do the job out here. Because I don't care who the U.S. attorney is, if it's appointed by a Democratic president or a Republican president or anybody. They understand the law enforcement reality on the ground out here in a significantly more important and better way than anybody in DC or Virginia. And we have to figure out how to give them the autonomy to do their job, because I believe this. I believe the people who are on the ground at federal offices and federal prosecutors out here, if they were allowed to do their job, you would be in a lot better situation sitting there than if decisions are being made in Washington, D.C. And then I just want to end, because I always find this funny and coincidental. This morning, the U.S. Border Patrol issued a statement, and I don't know if it had anything at all to do with this hearing or if it just really happened. But if you want to know how fine a point this is, and I'm going to read it and then introduce it into the record. U.S. Border Patrol agents assigned to the Grand Forks Sector's Pembina Station, along with a USBP K-9, responded to illegal activity at the border and discovered 3 backpacks filled with firearms. In the early morning hours on May 15th, agents responded to a report of suspicious activity west of the Nietzsche, North Dakota port of entry. Upon arrival, they observed 2 individuals absconding from the area into Canada. Agents performed a perimeter search for additional subjects, at which points K-9 Odin led them to 3 abandoned backpacks. While searching the backpacks, agents discovered that each contained firearms. The event resulted in the seizure of 65 handguns, 65 pistol magazines, 2 rifles, 1 suppressor, and 2 rifle magazines. All the weapons were transmitted to PMB for further processing. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms responded, took custody, and seized items, and will serve as lead investigative agency. There is currently no threat to the community at this time. 65 handguns. We spend an exorbitant amount of time in D.C. going after lawful gun owners instead of dealing with the actual issue that exists. When you think when we talk about this like this is an issue that only occurs on the southern border, I guess one last question, Attorney General, do you think those 65 handguns were going to go to law-abiding citizens?
I wouldn't have to think about that much. No, you raised, that's the exact issue, Mr. Chairman, Representative Armstrong. It's interesting. Well, you make the point better than I'm going to. That is troubling. Should trouble anybody. 65 firearms being trafficked by people who are themselves crossing that border illegally, and they just happen to get caught. That's a good lucky day. They just happen to get caught along this little sector of the country. We have the problem. We have a problem, very significant. The border needs to be closed. Everyone recognizes it. It's just not happening.
But we want to fight about whether a North Dakotan can buy a gun legally with a rural route address. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Again, Mr. Armstrong, thank you so much for inviting us here today. Oh, one other thing. Oh, yes, without
I asked
objection.
consent. I want to put this into the record.
Without objection, the article will be entered into the record. I want to thank all of you for coming and expressing your concerns over this issue. I want to thank the witnesses for their expertise today. That concludes today's hearing. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. And without objection, the hearing is adjourned.